Hi guys, and welcome back to the third episode of Gdf Diaries Season 2. Today we are joined by Freddie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on our show.
Pleasure.
I'm so excited to hear what you've got to tell us. I love what you've been doing as well. I linked in with him on LinkedIn. It's really a pattern here, guys. I'm telling you, get on LinkedIn. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, how old you are, and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 27 years old. I run a mental health platform called Vent. So Vent is a place where everyone, but especially men and boys, can open up about their mental health issues, break down stigmas, and start conversations.
Oh, love that. Hear that, men? Shine. Is there any socials that you would like to plug yourself with?
Yeah, so Vent's website is www.vent.org.uk. You can find Vent on all social media platforms at Vent Help UK. So that's VENTHELP UK. And then I've got a podcast called The Just Checking In Podcast. That's on all streaming platforms. Also got a music night called Just Checking In Live. So depending on when this goes out, the next one is on Saturday, January the 29th.
Oh, cool. Wow. Thank you. Is that something you do monthly, weekly?
No, it's only me.
Oh,
So, yeah. Well, I did 2 events in 2019 and then obviously the pandemic. So this is the first one in 3 years, but I will try and do maybe like 2 a year.
Oh, wow.
That's the ideal.
Okay, that sounds cool. Okay, let's dive straight in. So obviously I know this one's a bit different. Well, it's not really different. We're talking about sexual assault today, and anything that connects to that. So can you share with us your experience, your story?
Yeah, so I was sexually assaulted on one occasion by a primary school bully when I was about 7, 8 years old. So he'd been bullying me from say 3 years, so age 7 to about 9, 10. So for the listeners or watchers, it's like year 3 to like year 5, 6. So that was one incident, probably lasted about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 seconds, but it was basically a repressed memory for, I'd say, 18, 19 years. And after that, I was bullied for another 5 years from year 7 to 11 when I went to secondary school.
Was this the same person? Or
No. So I changed schools. I went from a very sheltered primary school to a very large secondary school. And I was bullied by different people then. And then loads of other things, which I can talk about if you want, but loads of other things, kind of suicide and self-harm, and a lot of trauma went on in secondary school. And then,
if you don't mind,
yeah, go on.
I don't want to.
I'm trying to keep it as steely as possible.
You don't. You know what? Yeah, go back. So when you left your first primary school, was it due to that incident and kind of like was it?
No. So the incident happened. I believe that it was dealt with as well as possibly could at the time, and given the context around mental health at that period, and then I think he left the school in at the end of year 5 maybe, and then I just went into year 6 and then graduated, whatever you want to call it, went to my secondary school.
Yeah. So in secondary school you said there was a lot, obviously there was some bullying there as well.
Yeah,
and then
I would actually say the secondary school bullying was worse. I would say the primary school bullying it felt more intense at the time because I was in a very small primary school class, 8, 9
he was
boys.
in your class?
Yeah. So it was only a class, it was, one class per year, and there was only, I'd say by the end, maybe 10, 11 boys, so it was basically just one group. So he was able to, he had a very adult mind at the time, despite being a child, so he was able to manipulate boys, social ostracization, exclusion, picking on low-hanging fruit. My surname, my football team was very unfashionable. I support Huddersfield Town, so very proud of that now. But at the time, obviously, as a kid, you just want to fit in. I was a very loud but sensitive, extroverted child. So he would pick on those things, and then obviously through that, you develop a sort of victim kind of mentality. And as I've worked through in therapy, in the years that have followed the trauma, kids can sniff a victim.
Was that trauma built from obviously your primary school?
Yeah, it just carried in. Yeah, just followed in. Like obviously, I didn't know that I was carrying it, but kids can subconsciously sniff weakness in kids. So that basically happened. I was bullied by 3 kids in my secondary school class. That was largely physical and verbal abuse. And then from year 9 to year 11, it was my social group. So my social group were really, there was daily kind of daily verbal abuse, daily physical abuse that they thought was funny. Cyberbullying as well happened a couple of times.
You know what? That's interesting because this is like, okay, we can. how do I word this? Because I feel like a lot of boys might actually have gone through that, and they wouldn't really see.
Yeah.
They'll think like it's normal, like boys just saying this and that and that. Like we look at boys like as girls, we're like, oh, they're so childish. They're always swearing and doing this and doing that. But we don't realize that the boys that within that group, that social group, might actually really be affected by it and really can't deal with it as well as other people. I don't know if I'm really wording this right, because obviously you've gone through a trauma previously and you're going into this, and there's more and more. Like, obviously, like you said there was obviously self-harming, there was suicide. Do you mind me asking you about that? So how did you get to that point, may I ask? Like,
so the self-harm took a few methods. So when I got to university, the self-harm took like method of like overeating, a lot of reckless behaviour without wanting to incriminate myself.
Okay.
And
the end.
And,
Cut that
out. No, don't worry about that. I've left it as vague as possible. But what I worked through in therapy in the last year and a half was self-harm through nail biting.
Right.
And that's what I've done since I was about 7 or 8. So that's really the earliest form of self-harm, and that was horrifically bad. That was biting nails down to the skin, bleeding.
Wow.
Ended up once when I was like 24, 25, biting one so hard it kind of got infected. I get lanced at Whipps Cross Hospital. Wow. So yeah, just really, really bad. But I didn't know that was self-harm. I viewed self-harm in very stereotypical methods that people. You
saying that, even I'm surprised, because I didn't know there was private.
And so it took therapy to realise that I was doing it, and it was a form of self-harm, and then addressing why, because I later found out through working through in therapy that it was a communication tool, or it was a coping mechanism for me. If I was getting bullied, I might bite my nails, or if I wanted to feel like I needed my voice to be heard, I'll bite my nails, or then people would see it, maybe my parents would see it and they'd notice it, but then what would happen was it'd be a constant cycle where they would see it and I feel so ashamed. You know, you go on a date with a girl and you're hiding your hands under the table, like you don't want to be doing that as a boy. Then once I realised that this was what was at the heart of that trauma, I've not self-harmed since February last year.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Everybody. No, that's really good. Wow. Yeah. Okay, and in terms of like the suicide point, how did you get there?
So I had probably suicidal ideation or suicidality for on and off most of my childhood and early teenage years until like 16. So the first time I was in year 9. So I was 13.
That's still quite young,
and you know, looking back, the way that I did it, I won't go into the details, but what I thought was an overdose probably wasn't an overdose. Do you know what I mean? And now looking back, I probably didn't actually want to kill myself, but I just
wanted things to stop.
I couldn't live anymore. That was, and that's how a lot of people who are suicidal actually feel and have articulated. So that was the first time. And then I'd say year 10 to 11, when bullying my social was really, really horrific, just really persistent, consistent, daily. I came close to taking my own life through hanging.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And getting close to, I kind of call them near misses, kind of practicing doing it or making plans to do it. But only once have I ever really come close to actually taking that final step. Yeah. Right. And that was in year 11, and that was after I'd been cyberbullied online by my social group. Luckily, I was only bullied through Facebook. That's what I joke about now. Whereas the kids now,
it's quite savage. Like even as you're saying that, I'm just thinking, especially online, cyberbullying. I feel like when people use the word bullying, they don't realize it's actually abuse they're going through. Do you get what I mean? Because like you even mentioned, it's the verbal, the physical abuse, all of that stuff. And in school, they make it sound like, oh yeah, bullying, like it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal because
they disguise it as
it's kind of like but it's not good. Like, do you get what I mean? So even you sharing that experience, your experiences, thank you so much.
That's
because
right, no problem,
I never actually expected you to go that deep.
I joke that I'm lucky I only got bullied on Facebook, and it was only on the family computer next to the laundry basket. Like Facebook wasn't on your phones back then. I'm 27, so luckily I caught the sort of start of Facebook for kids or teenagers. But I've said on many other platforms and stuff that if I had been bullied now online, I don't think I'd have survived.
Yeah, I was about to ask you that. Do you think that if you had all the socials that we have now?
Oh, no way. It would be.
And that's making me question in my head what
Instagram,
Yeah.
Twitter, WhatsApp,
And
Snapchat.
Twitter's savage.
And the thing with Snapchat as well, one of the ways the reason the kids like it is because, you know, cancel culture is so big, so it deletes messages, but that also deletes evidence. So if someone was getting bullied in a group chat or whatever, and they said, "Oh, I want to report it,"
you can't unless you've literally screenshotted
and that
it or
helps
whatever.
the perpetrators. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
No, 100%. Oh wow. Whew. That was
take
quite a
breath.
lot. That was quite a lot.
I keep it as short as I can. So
No, it's fine. I was going to ask you, so in terms of what you do, because right now I know you're raising awareness, can you tell me more about that? What is your aim? What do you do? What do you want to achieve?
Yeah, sure. So for me, Vent I started it for two reasons. So one was to give men a place where they could articulate and express emotions outside of what people normally thought of as traditional male emotions. So violence or, you know, when I was in school, all boys talked about was masturbating, FIFA, and who was the best at fighting.
Ew.
So
No,
like, that's what young boys did, and I wanted to show that men are more complex creatures, that we're capable of loads of things, and we're not defined by one simple label or put into a box. And then I guess the other reason was that came out of it was a near-miss suicide attempt, and after that moment I didn't feel like a human being anymore. I felt like I was a husk of a human, and I think what kept me from doing it was the last shred of my self-worth telling me not to go through with it. And in that moment, I said to myself, even when I was like 15, 16, if I can stop, I felt like I had nothing left to give to myself. I had nothing else to live for. So I said, if I can help anyone not feel the way I do in this moment, that's what I'll try and do. And that's where I guess the desire for Vent came, but the idea for it in more crystallized form came when I went to I had a catch up with my best mate Hannah, and I'd had some experience in sort of website editing and stuff like that through my full-time job. And I said, oh, you know, Hannah, I'm thinking about doing something in mental health. Like, I keep going for these mental health charity jobs and not getting anywhere. Like, I get to second interview or something like that and I don't get anywhere, but I want to do something myself. And she said, oh, what would you do, Fred? And I said, oh, you know, whenever someone has something important to get off their chest or they want to have a deep conversation with me, they say they want to vent to me. And I said, oh, if I do something, I want to call it Vent. She said, that's great. Like, I said, oh, I had imposter syndrome. I said, oh, I don't really know. Like, is anyone going to like go on this website? Is anyone going to do anything? He said, if you just help one person, that's your objective done. So I set the website up. It was just a blog at the start, and I put my own story out there. And
how was that?
It was the hardest step, but the best step. It's still that article is still the most read on the site. It's got like 1,500 plus reads.
Wow.
And then a friend from uni, his boyfriend got in touch with me, and he said, really love what you're doing. I've been looking for a platform for ages to like express how I feel and share my story. And he shared his story, and Steve was the first Vent champion. So shout out Steve. I always give him a shout whenever whenever I do any Vent PR. So
Oh no, that's amazing. That's
and it's just gone
great.
from there.
And
podcast, music night, poetry section, everything.
Oh, that's sick. That's sick. I feel like, especially because this society has this view of how men should express their feelings, and when they do, like willingly and feel like they're in a free space, women still criticize them. Because I'll be honest, when I was younger, I had this idea of men need to be strong all the time, or
every
this.
Man has to be an alpha,
do you get what I mean? But as I started growing and within my job, I started realizing like it's really tough for you guys, especially like if you are a victim of certain situations or certain things, abuse, whether it's anything. A lot of men wouldn't feel like they could really openly express their feelings or even talk about it, full stop.
It's a trust thing. I feel like, you know, speaking to a lot of men and giving them a voice, men have to build up a lot more trust. Stereotypically, by the way, this is not every man, but women do.
100%.
In social groups can be much more accepting and open straight away.
And have that safe space as well,
Whereas men, you know, we might need a couple more drinks to get us kind of in that mood, or it might be at an after party or something like that. That's still my mates now, and they've all come on my podcast.
But that's what I'm saying. But it shouldn't even be like that. We shouldn't have to have like 5 drinks and be more comfortable to be able to speak.
It shouldn't.
But it's literally probably just how we are raised in society.
I think it's a cultural thing, and I think it's how we're wired as well. You know, I think for me, the two main things that stop or make men less encouraged to speak out is one, fear of judgment by the men, and I think that is going. And then I think a lot has changed in recent years about that. And like you said, when you were sort of growing and you were realizing about the complexity of men, the fear of being judged by women. So the fear that if they talk about or express vulnerability, it will be seen as weakness by a woman in a romantic situation, or the woman will lose interest.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two main fears. So within ourselves, within other men, and in a romantic situation. And
I'm not trying to pry into your life, but how do you feel like it's affected the way you see, I don't know, relationships with women or men, or just in general, whether it's platonic, whether it's romantic, you being who you are now, and if you think back to who you was before, how do you see how you've kind of changed?
So in relation to the trauma, or in navigating this?
Navigating everything. Do you get what I mean?
That's a good question.
Because I think, from my understanding, he was probably kind of withdrawn back then, like he wasn't as open to speak to everybody, or was you?
No,
I don't know.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
So
and now you seem kind of more like,
hey,
what's that,
people?
It
took me a long time ago. So the first time I ever spoke to someone openly was when I was at uni, because I felt like I was in a safe space and I was becoming
so that environment was there.
I was hated in school by most people in the year. Like, I was told to kill myself on a regular basis, and when I got to uni and I was realizing that people like me for who I am, like it took a while to get used to. Like I was
kind of
paranoia,
confused,
like, oh, you like me because you're trying to abuse me in a late situation, or you're trying to get to me, or you're doing it because you feel pity for me. Like, there's a lot of these trust issues going on, and then when I finally started going into that space and feeling more accepting of myself, obviously I was far away from it, but I describe it as like putting a Mentos in a Coke bottle. So all that suppression, all that repressed memories and traumas that I had to do to survive as a coping mechanism, all came out, and in a big way. So how it's affected my relationships with both men and women. I think for men, I feel like they trust me, and that's been a big privilege for me in doing events.
Especially what you're doing,
because you become the holder of a lot of their fears and their anxieties and their traumas and their secrets, which is a big privilege to have. And girls as well. Girls have come to me with a lot of things. I guess with women, and coming back to the sexual abuse, that's massively impacted, and it's impacted me in ways I've only just started to realise. So, I've not had a long-term relationship. The sexual abuse is probably a reason for that, and the trauma related to that. I'm sure you've talked to a few male survivors. It can make us question our sexuality in a really irrational way. Like, I've never had a romantic or sexual feeling for any man ever, but the abuse makes you think. It almost gives you. Psychologists will call it internalized homophobia, but I've got loads of gay mates and I've never been homophobic to gay men. Or some people call it like homosexual OCD.
Oh, wow.
So that was a lot to deal with, and that comes from,
even as you're saying it, I'm like,
it's a lot to take in, and that I had to work through really intense therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which is called EMDR.
I've heard of that. I've heard of EMDR. I didn't even know it's. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of taps and going to a safe space, and then reenacting traumas in your head, and then moving your eyes from side to side. And
you know what's crazy? I think I've had training on that recently. Not training, but they came into work and they explained different type of therapies. And I think they showed us a lady was talking to us and telling us to do certain things.
The taps,
and I was like, damn, this is
Butterfly
serious.
Wings,
Okay.
So I've done 2 rounds of that in the last 2 years, and that was life changing for me. So I've done 2 rounds of CBT before that, and that was really good for just management tools and just being able to kind of change negative thought patterns. I had a podcast guest called CBT, Stoicism in a Can, which I thought was really useful, like a really good way of thinking about it. But the EMDR was life changing for me, and I've written about it a little bit, and I've got an article coming out next week. Will be the last sort of article on sexual abuse that I've written, and what I found is that the internalized homophobia comes from something called involuntary arousal, which I don't remember happening, but my brain does, where the assault, your body will react to it. You think you're being stimulated by it, when it's actually your body just reacting to it like a child would, and that causes the internalized homophobia.
Wow, that's
crazy. I can't speak for other survivors, and I can't speak for survivors who've been abused by women, but from a male to male situation, that was my experience, and it was a 5-second event. Do you know what I mean? And it's had such a
impact,
massive. I joke that I'd rather talk about suicide all day long than talk about sexual abuse, because it is still such a such a stigmatized subject. You know, when I came out about it, I could count the number of people who are open about it, men, sorry, on one hand, and we've obviously kind of had a few more, but it's still massively stigmatized.
Oh, 100%, and that's exactly why I want to have these conversations, because it's important.
I appreciate you having those conversations.
I appreciate you even coming to share it with us, because it's like you're being a voice to the voiceless. Do you get what I mean? Someone might be going through this, or have been going through this, or is in the same position as you, where it happened years ago, but they don't really know how to deal with it. So yeah, I was going to ask you, what would your advice be to someone either going through it or had gone through it and they don't know how to deal with it?
Yeah.
You know,
I'd first of all say take your time. I think I've read a lot that the average time for a man to talk about sexual abuse is 20 years.
Wow.
So for me, it was a repressed memory, and I think mine took. So I was 7 or 8 when it happened, and I think I came out about it when I was 25. So I was under the average,
that's
basically.
so crazy.
But normally it's about 20 years.
Wow.
So I'd say to anyone listening and watching, take your time. You don't have to talk about it straight away. Build up trust with someone that you feel comfortable enough to talk about it. Doesn't have to be a parent. It can be a parent, a friend, a teacher, a relative, anyone that you think is a neutral arbiter and you can trust with that information, who can listen empathically, who can, you know, hear your pain and react in the best way possible, because, you know, that is a very important first conversation. If that person reacts negatively, that could set that person back.
You're right.
5, 10, 15, and for a man, that's massive.
That's huge. 100%. Wow, thank you so much. Like, I feel like this was even a lesson for me. Like, I've learned so many different things. We've got a little thank you present for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I wasn't expecting that.
No, it's not.
Open it now, or?
You can open it later,
Okay,
just in case you don't like it.
Don't get the reaction on camera.
literally, because I'll be like, no, I'm joking. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for coming on today. So if you can make sure you like, comment, subscribe down below, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.